The cold air of Forks filtered through the trees, forming whispers in the mist. Bella Swan had never truly felt at home anywhere, but there was something about this small, damp town that unsettled her more than usual. It wasn't just the perpetual rain or the feeling of being trapped in a routine that didn't belong to her. No, it was something deeper, like an echo inside her mind, a sensation that she didn't quite fit in her own skin. For as long as she could remember, Bella had felt that something in her was different. Not in the way a shy or introverted person feels different, but as if there was an invisible thread separating her from the rest of the world. She never got sick. Her reflexes were too sharp to be normal. And sometimes, when she focused on someone with enough intensity, she could feel a strange pulse in her mind, as if something inside her reacted to the presence of others. When she arrived in Forks, those feelings intensified, and when she met the Cullens, her whole world changed. Edward Cullen watched her with an intensity that almost burned her. His gaze wasn't that of a normal boy. It wasn't simple curiosity or attraction. It was something more. It was recognition. At first, Bella thought it was just a whim, a game of intense glances, awkward silences, and chance encounters. But soon, Edward began to avoid her, only to appear later as if he couldn't stay away, as if he was trapped in an internal struggle. And when the truth about what he was finally came to light, when he revealed the nature of himself and his family, Bella felt a piece of the puzzle fall into place. But what Edward didn't tell her, what he couldn't tell her yet, was that she wasn't just a special girl. She was the result of an experiment centuries in the making. Far from Forks, in the cavernous halls of the Volturi castle, Arrow slid his pale fingers down the arm of one of his informants, absorbing memories with a satisfied smile. "So, they have finally found her," he murmured, his voice a soft yet lethal echo in the stone chamber. Caius and Marcus, his eternal companions, exchanged a glance. "Are you sure it's her?" Caius asked with a skeptical frown. Arrow turned his head slowly, savoring the moment. "Oh yes, I have no doubt. After so many failed attempts, our little Isabella has blossomed exactly where we wanted." Marcus sighed, his voice dull and distant. "If the Cullens have found her first, that means they suspect." Arrow smiled, intertwining his fingers. "Of course they suspect. After all, she is not a mere human. But it doesn't matter. The Cullens may believe they are protecting her." He paused, his smile turning even more predatory. "But sooner or later, Bella will discover the truth, and then she will come to us willingly." In Forks, Bella began noticing strange things around her. Not just in the way Edward looked at her, but in how the entire Cullen family always seemed to be waiting for something, watching her, as if anticipating a moment that had not yet arrived. Alice, usually carefree and radiant, had a worried expression whenever she was near Bella, as if she were seeing something in Bella's future that she couldn't fully understand. Jasper, who usually controlled the emotions around him, reacted unusually to her, as if his ability became erratic in her presence. And Edward was growing more tense by the day. It was one afternoon, under Fork's gray sky, when everything spiraled out of control. Bella was with Edward in their meadow, the place that had become a secret refuge for them. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Edward stood before her, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with something that was not just love, but fear. "Bella," he whispered, and his voice sounded broken. "There's something I haven't told you." Bella felt her heartbeat quicken. "What is it?" she asked, a shiver running down her spine. Edward took a step forward, his hands trembling. "You are not just a human." The world seemed to stop. "What?" Bella whispered, but deep down, a part of her already knew. Edward closed his eyes for a second before looking at her with an inhuman intensity. "The Volturi have been experimenting with humans for centuries, searching for someone with natural abilities before the transformation, someone who could be a bridge between both species. And you." He paused, as if fearing his own words. "You are the only success they've ever had." Bella felt her skin prickle. "That doesn't make sense. I'm just—" But then, as if her own body wanted to prove otherwise, something inside her ignited. It was an ancient sensation, dormant for years, like electricity coursing through every cell of her being. The wind swirled around her. The shadows of the trees stretched, and the world became sharper, more defined. Edward looked at her with a mix of awe and horror. "Bella, your eyes." She blinked, and in that instant, her vision expanded as if she could see beyond time and space. She could sense the presence of every living being for miles, their minds like sparks glowing in the darkness. She could feel the Volturi watching her from afar. And then she knew. Her life in Forks had been a lie. She had never been just Bella Swan. She was their greatest experiment. And now, the Volturi knew she was ready. Bella felt dizzy, as if her mind were sliding down a steep and uncontrollable slope. Edward stepped closer, gripping her shoulders desperately. "We can't stay here," he whispered. "The Cullens have known about this for a long time, and we've been preparing. We have to leave before it's too late." Bella looked at him, her mind still burning with revelation. Preparing for what? Edward clenched his jaw. For war. Bella felt her entire world collapse. She had believed she had escaped her fate, but in reality, she had been walking straight into it. The Volturi wanted her, and the Cullens, they had been waiting for her. And then, in some corner of her mind, a voice whispered an unsettling truth. What the Volturi have created cannot be controlled. Bella felt the weight of the truth sinking into her chest like an anchor. All her life, she had felt that something in her was different, but she never could have imagined that her very existence was the result of an ancient experiment. Edward kept holding on to her desperately, as if he could prevent reality from consuming her completely. "We have to go, Bella. Right now." But Bella didn't move. She couldn't. Her mind swirled with images, fragments of memories she didn't recall living. Underground stone chambers, figures dressed in black robes murmuring in forgotten tongues, a sharp pain coursing through her body while a hissing voice whispered, "Perfection. At last, we have found it. It's not just that the Volturi are after me, is it?" Her voice trembled, but her body did not. "They've been waiting for this moment my whole life." Edward pressed his lips together and nodded. Alice has been seeing fragments of this in her visions for months, but every time she tried to see the future clearly, everything went blurry, as if something or someone was blocking her gift. Now we know why. Bella looked at Edward, her heart pounding like a war drum. "It's not that Alice couldn't see my future, it's that I was the blind spot." Edward swallowed hard. "We don't know what you're truly capable of, but the Volturi do. And the worst part," he inhaled deeply, as if he hated what he was about to say, "is that deep down, you probably do too." A shadow passed through Bella's mind. No, she didn't know, but deep in her soul, she felt that something had been waiting to awaken inside her since the moment she was born. A crack in the forest made her spin around suddenly. They were not alone. Edward growled and stepped in front of her, his stance defensive. "They got here faster than we thought," he whispered angrily. Bella felt the air pressure shift. Everything became denser, as if the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. From between the trees, 3 figures emerged. They wore black, their cloaks barely floating above the damp ground. Their red eyes gleamed with hunger. The Volturi were already there. Bella Swan. The voice was soft, seductive, too calm for the danger they represented. "What a joy to finally meet you." The one who had spoken stepped forward. He was tall, with dark hair falling over his shoulders. His lips were curved in a predatory smile. Edward hissed, baring his teeth. "Dimitri," he spat the name with contempt. The Volturi's most lethal tracker tilted his head with amusement. "You know this is pointless, Edward. We didn't come to fight. We just want to talk." Bella felt a tug in her mind, something invisible, something she couldn't see, trying to slip into her consciousness. But instead of succumbing, Bella felt her own power awaken. An invisible barrier erupted from within her, like a shockwave that swept through the forest in all directions. Dimitri staggered backward, his eyes wide with surprise. Edward looked at her as if he had just witnessed a miracle. Bella felt the air vibrate around her. "No," she said firmly, her eyes gleaming with a spark that had never been there before. "They don't want to talk. They want to take me." Dimitri recovered, but his smile had vanished. "You don't understand what you are, Bella. You can't fight this. It's part of you." Bella clenched her fists. "Maybe, but it's also my choice." The trees trembled. Something in the air shifted again. The pressure increased. Bella felt her own energy responding to the presence of the vampires in front of her. It was as if her body was tuned to detect their presence, to counteract it. Dimitri frowned. Interesting. Edward didn't wait any longer. In a flash, he attacked. Everything happened in an instant. Dimitri blocked Edward's strike, spinning him midair and hurling him against a tree with monstrous force. The trunk splintered under the impact, but Edward was already back on his feet before the shards hit the ground. Bella felt a primitive rage shoot down her spine. A roar built inside her chest. Before she could even understand what she was doing, she raised a hand. The air around her compressed, and suddenly, Dimitri was hurled through the air as if an invisible force had struck him full on. He crashed into the ground with brutal force, leaving a deep mark in the earth. A second of absolute silence. Edward stared at her, completely astonished. Bella breathed heavily, feeling the heat course through her veins. Dimitri slowly got up. His clothes were torn, his expression a mix of surprise and satisfaction. "Yes," he whispered with a twisted smile. Exactly what Aro expected. Bella felt a shiver run through her. It wasn't just about finding her. The Volturi had known this moment would come. They were testing her. Before she could react, Dimitri and the other vampires vanished into the forest shadows. Edward rushed to her side. "Bella, are you okay?" She didn't respond, because deep in her mind something new was awakening, and she knew the worst was yet to come. The Volturi would not give up, and she was not going to run.